Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Thanks for clicking on this video. So today I'll be talking to you about the Sony A6400, the little APS-C hybrid camera. This is the first camera that I've ever owned, and I'm going to talk to you about some of my thoughts on this camera. So if you're interested in what I have to say about it, then keep on watching. So this camera review is going to be more of my subjective personal opinions. I'm not going to do like a professional camera review, so I won't give you a bunch of numbers. These are just some qualitative comments and thoughts that I've had having used this camera for I think over 3 years now, and just my thoughts on it. There is a viewfinder, which is fantastic for if you are taking photos outside and it's super sunny and super bright and you can't see anything on the screen. You can also flip it up so you can take selfies very easily, or if you want to record yourself, you can see what's going on in the monitor. Unfortunately, it doesn't flip out this side, but this has been fine. I actually also haven't been able to figure out how to do this on my full frame camera, but this camera recognizes when you're taking a selfie, so it kind of keeps focus when you take a selfie photo like this, and you can take great selfie photos with this camera. These are the dials on top, so you've got all the standard modes. I usually only use manual or aperture mode now. I used to use auto mode a lot. There's also the recording mode as well, so that's all there. I think there is one custom button that you can set, the C1, so you can set that, you can map that to whatever you want it to be. And this is the interface. That's what it looks like. So you've got all your standard buttons there. There's the lens release button there, so you just click it and then you take the lens off, and then that's the size of the sensor there. So pretty cool. Fortunately, this one does not have the shutter, I think that comes down. So you just gotta make sure that you use a lens blower to get the dust out. So this camera was the first mirrorless camera that I have ever owned. I first purchased this in mid-2021, and the idea for getting this camera came after I directed my first public recital with my harpist partner, and that was sort of the first public recital that we'd held on our own. We organized it ourselves and we managed to put it on. It was right after the pandemic lockdowns, so it was quite a big project for us, and luckily for that event, my harpist partner's husband had a camera that he could capture the whole concert with, and that was when I realized that if it wasn't for him, then that whole project would have gone unarchived and nobody would have been able to record this massive event that we'd put on. And this is because I enjoyed organizing that first recital so much that I thought I'd definitely be hosting more of them, but I definitely don't have the budget to hire a professional photographer or videographer to record those recitals. And I just thought, well, I'll just buy my own camera, get a family member or my husband specifically to hit the record button or take photos during the event. This was when I also realized the importance of recording your professional work and documenting it, because I think it's absolutely imperative in today's day and age to have evidence and documentation of your professional work, especially if you're trying to become a freelancing professional musician. It's very important to show potential clients like students and parents of those students, or prospective employers, you know, people who might want to ask you to do a gig for them, to show them your professional experience and show them the level of skill that you have through these videos and through this media that you put up. It's very, very important to put up your own portfolio of work to convince prospective employers or clients to give you work. And originally I was actually going to get a Canon EOS camera. I actually don't remember which model I was deciding on. I think it was, my budget was like $500 or something. I really wasn't looking to spend too much money on it. But my uncle convinced me to go for this camera because he'd read reviews on it, and he sort of has a slight interest on cameras, and he recommended that I go for this one because he said that the image quality would be better, and I told him that I wanted a hybrid camera that could do both video and photos. And so I ended up purchasing this camera for, I think it was 1,400 Australian dollars. I can't remember, maybe it was 1,200, but I got it with the kit lens, which I have since sold. The lens that I currently have on this camera is the 50mm 1.8 prime lens, and it is the APS-C Sony lens. That's the only APS-C lens I have at the moment. I did have two other lenses, like I mentioned, the kit lens, which I sold. I also had a zoom lens. I also had the, I believe it was the 18 to the 135 variable aperture lens, but I also sold that because I discovered that I wasn't really a fan of variable aperture, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. So the kit lens that I got with this camera served us very, very well for the first 2 years. I was able to capture most of my recitals with it, and I was also able to do a couple of portrait shoots, nothing too fancy, but there were nice photos that I could use for my website or for sending to people for when I got work. They looked much better than a photo you can take on your smartphone. The reason why I also really liked having my own camera was because I'm very particular about how I want my portrait photos to look, and having my own camera and having my husband there to take photos of me meant that I could keep, we could keep retaking shots that I weren't happy with until I got the look that I liked, and I could also do some editing in Lightroom to get the specific, color grading that I wanted. I just had a lot more creative control over the recordings and the photos that were coming out of this camera. And of course, like being a complete noob, when I got this camera, I was only able to use it in auto mode for the longest time, and it took a really long time. It took a lot of reading up, a lot of video watching to sort of get a grasp on how to work a camera, which I like to think now I have somewhat of an idea. I've graduated from the auto mode. I can now work mostly in manual mode or aperture mode, which is great, and also get to know a little bit more on the specific photo and video settings that work best for my use case, which are usually very dynamic, long form music performances. And so throughout doing multiple projects, I've sort of learned how I want to best capture my work. And I'm also so glad that I now know how to do all of this, because spoiler alert, they don't teach you any of these skills in music conservatorium. They sort of tell you that it's important, to make a website, and it's important to sell yourself, but they don't do any technical skill training on how to use a recorder, how to use a Zoom recorder, how to use a camera. So all these skills that I've learned have sort of just been from me working things out and wanting to produce more high quality archive recordings that I can display on my professional website and to my supporters and to my concert goers who attend my recitals. So now I guess I'll talk a bit about why I decided to get rid of the kit lens, some pros and cons of the kit lens, as well as the other variable aperture zoom lens that I had with this camera. I sold both of them at the start of the year because I just wasn't picking them up and I wasn't happy with their performance for my specific use case. So with the kit lens, I no longer have it, but like I mentioned, it was absolutely the perfect lens to start off with, being a complete camera noob. The variable aperture of the lens, and I think it starts at 3.5, which is already not, it's not the highest, but if I wanted to zoom in, it would go I think it went as high as like 5.6 or something as the minimum aperture, which meant that it didn't really perform super well in low light settings, which for the budget venues that I usually have to book for my recitals, it means that we're relying just on the light sources that are already in the venue itself, and we currently don't have the budget or the skills to implement extra lighting fixtures. That is something that we're hoping to be able to do in the future, but at the moment it's just not a possibility. And so I'm really relying on a lens that can perform really well in low light, and the kit lens plus the combination of the APS-C size sensor, which is smaller than full frame, and so it doesn't perform as well as a full frame, just wasn't really doing it for me. I would end up with pretty grainy footage. Granted, I didn't know how to shoot and log back then as well, so that was probably that. I guess I can probably play around with it a little bit more, the log settings, but I didn't want to really work with color grading. I kind of just want the footage to be usable as soon as it comes out of the camera. So the kit lens wasn't really doing it for us. I also think the image quality wasn't the greatest in low light as well. So that's why I decided to sell the kit lens and to pick up my first prime lens, which is this one here. It is the 50mm f1.8 lens, and I've taken some absolutely beautiful shots with this, which I will show you. But this lens on this camera actually works really well when you're outside, broad daylight. You can open the lens up right up to 1.8 and shoot at like frame rate of 4000 or something, and the photos come out so sharp, and the colors also look absolutely beautiful. Some pros about the kit lens though. The kit lens, it's really compact and portable, so it's great because it has a really small footprint, especially if you're traveling overseas. I remember my first Europe trip, which happened in July 2022, I carried this camera with the kit lens, and I was able to, you know, take some really beautiful photos with it, because most of the time we were out during the day. So that was absolutely no problem, and it was a really discreet sort of setup, so I didn't feel like I was, you know, pointing this big camera in people's faces all the time, and it was very easy to just slip in and out of my little sling bag that I had. And the other zoom lens that I decided to sell, same thing, I really just wasn't happy with the variable aperture. I think the versatility of the focal length was really good. I really love that you could zoom from 18 to 135. It's quite a big range, you know, it goes from wide to telephoto. But I guess I also wanted to start trying out prime lenses. So once I got the prime lens, I also was much happier with the amount of control you could have over the shutter speed and the aperture, which was something that you can't really do with the variable aperture lenses. And so I decided to sell that lens as well. I'll talk about the pros of this camera and what I really enjoyed about using it. So it's great for photos and videos. I would say this camera is probably going to fit better in my workflow as a photo camera than a video camera. And that is simply due to the fact that it overheats around the 50-minute mark, and I've been in many situations where I get to the end of my recital and this camera just shuts off, and that to me is a huge problem because I can't redo the recitals again. So if it doesn't get the recording of one of my pieces, then I lose that. And we do have like redundancy footage that, you know, my husband takes on his phone, or I'll get my family to put one of their smartphones and record the whole recital on that. But I'm a bit of a footage snob now. I just don't like the look of the footage that comes out of a smartphone. I just prefer the camera footage, so that wasn't going to work for me. And this was with us sort of turning the camera, like stopping the recording in between each of the pieces as well, but it still wasn't enough to cool it down. Yeah, but other than that, the video quality is actually also really good. I have no complaints of the video quality, especially when there's enough light. The colors do look really nice. I don't really even adjust it too much. I just kind of take the footage straight out of the camera and it's pretty much usable. So you can also record 4K using this camera, but I believe the file sizes are a little bit big, so they take up a bit more space. Again, it's super lightweight and easy, so it sits really nicely on a tripod. It doesn't fall over or anything. I do really like the size of it because I have really small hands, so the small body actually fits really well in my hands and I really like it. I've taken some great action shots like in recital photos with this camera, especially with some of my other lenses. So for example, I have a full frame 85 f1.8 lens that I like to put on this camera, and because I'm putting a full frame lens on an APS-C body, I actually get a bit of extra reach with the 1.5 times crop. The camera can reach quite far with the focal length and really get some of those really nice performer shots. because I'm in the Sony system now, I really like that I'm able to use both APS-C and full frame lenses on this camera. I still think that it's going to be quite a valuable piece of equipment in my workflow. I think what I envision for this camera is for it to be a B cam on the side, so I can get maybe a different shot or a close-up of one of the other performers in addition to just the standard front-on shot that I have, or this will be our dedicated photo camera that we use. I believe this one actually, for photos, it can take 24 megapixel photos, so that's more than enough for social media. I think it still looks really good, even blown up on a website as well. Overall, I think this has been a really, really great camera. I don't see myself selling it anytime soon, and I think it was a really great introductory camera into the world of photography and videography. I still do think I can get quite a lot out of this camera, and I do envision myself taking this with me when I'm traveling if I want a light setup, because even though I do own a full frame camera now, it is still just a little bit bigger than the APS-C, than the A6400. So I think we won't be retiring this camera anytime soon. Although I think because the only lens I have on this camera at the moment is a 50mm, which is more of a 75mm in full frame terms, so it's really quite tight, I would like to get a wider lens, so a little bit more of a wider focal length, so it's a little bit more versatile for like everyday photos. My favorite focal length at the moment for everyday photos is actually the 35mm. I just think it's wide enough to capture the environment, but it doesn't give you that weird fishbowl effect, which I'm not a huge fan of, and it's not too tight or compressed like the 85 or the 135, because the background starts to get, you know, really pulled apart. So to summarize, great camera, very lightweight, very compact, very easy to travel with. Sony E-System is great for being able to use all types of E-mount lenses. Fantastic photo quality if you're shooting outside or in a situation where you have plenty of light and you're using a prime lens. That can let in a lot of light as well. Overall, really great entry APS-C camera if you find yourself wanting to move on and graduate from your smartphone. Anyway, I think that's it. So that's all my thoughts on this camera. If you've made it to the end of the video, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.